Hmm. Good evening, everyone. Just to let you know, we're going to start shortly.
Chair Mr. Mark Haver, Your Excellencies, Chair Mr. Mark Haver, Your Excellencies,
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Woo! It's 6:30 on a Saturday. Truly, I want to thank you all so much for being here for this incredible side event with UN Oceans. My name is Mark Haver. I'm with Sustainable Ocean Alliance as their global policy advisor and North America regional representative. And I am so excited to be part of this distinguished panel and distinguished audience today to understand how we can leverage UN interagency collaboration. It's incredibly important that we focus on what people are calling this COP, right? We are calling it an implementation COP. But listen, over the past 5 days that I've been here, I've honestly heard a lot of blah, blah, blah. It's critically important that we don't just understand how to leverage the negotiations, but we also need to understand how to leverage some of the best ocean and climate talent that has gathered all around the world in one common room. How are we able to facilitate the engagement of some of the most innovative solutions that we need? I think it's critically important for us to think not just about innovation, but particularly about the implementation of innovation. I think that's the uniqueness of collaboration. we're able to understand the ways in which that we're able to leverage the unique systems, process, knowledge, and experience that's required for us to truly be able to support these on-the-ground innovative solutions. I want to thank my panel and Joanna Post from the UNFCCC for including me in today's panel. It means a lot for youth voices like myself to be present in these conversations. And I want to bring a history lesson from my region. I'm from the United States of America. And when I think about innovation, I think that there are many histories and many models that can teach us this important lesson. One innovative thing, at least of its time, was the United States Constitution. It's been replicated in so many countries and is still a constitution that people look to in creating their own types of governance frameworks. But the US Constitution was written with founding fathers like Alexander Hamilton that were in their late 20s and early 30s. Especially when we think about deploying UN and interagency collaboration, we need to understand how we can support that innovation. We need to understand what experiences allow us to really be able to leverage this common stakeholder governance framework with the young people that are also leading and deploying the innovative solutions. I think it's incredibly important that we can leverage this opportunity for intergenerational dialogue to learn from the experiences that many of our speakers have today. I can't think of a panelist guest here who wouldn't know more about being able to understand and maneuver the many systems, processes, rules, and regulations that exist within the UN system. I think, especially if we're on track to a world of 2.4 degrees of warming or more, that we need to understand how to hack the system. This does require the knowledge of rules and regulations. And so my challenge and my framing for this conversation today is how can we understand what challenges exist within the UN systems that hinder us from being able to actually implement innovation, and how can we break down these silos to truly encourage the type of collaboration that actually gets us to the implementation of innovation. I now want to go ahead and introduce our amazing panelists today. We have the distinguished Mr. Miguel de Serpa Suarez, who will be represented by Valentina Germani. Mr. Miguel de Serpa Suarez is the Undersecretary General for Legal Affairs at the UN Legal Council and the UN Oceans Focal Point. We also have Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin, who is the IOC UNESCO Executive Secretary. And we also have a video to present to you all today from the UNCTAD Secretary General, Ms. Rebecca Grinspan. Without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Valentina.
Thank you very much, Mark, and we are delighted to have you here with us to bridge those distances, if we can call it that way, between the older generations and the newer generations. So thank you for being here with us. And now I'm going to read a statement from Miguel de Serpa Suarez, the UN Legal Counsel, who is also the UN Ocean Focal Point. Excellencies, distinguished participants, friends and colleagues, it is my great pleasure to open this UN Oceanside event on the theme, the power of interagency cooperation to scale up ocean climate action, case studies, challenges and opportunities at this 27th session of the Conference of the Parties to the UNFCCC. Recognition was given in last year's Glasgow Climate Pact of the crucial interlinkages between the ocean and climate. We are all aware of both the significant role that the ocean plays in climate regulation and mitigation efforts, but also the devastating impacts climate change is having on this most valuable of shared resources. It goes without saying that we're facing a planetary emergency that is not getting the attention nor the urgent action that it deserves. As reiterated by the United Nations Secretary General, climate change is the defining issue of our time. Recent scientific reports tell us that global emissions are still increasing, despite warning after warning of the consequences, and that the impacts on our ocean continue to accelerate. The pressing need to mitigate the catastrophic effect of climate change for generations to come must be prioritized globally. Climate change is a top priority of the UN system. United Nations entities are working as one to support member states in taking measures to halt and adapt to destructive trends. Members of UN Oceans, the interagency mechanism for strengthening and promoting cooperation and the coherence of the UN system activities related to ocean and coastal areas, are doing so in the ocean space. Today's event will showcase some examples of this work with a focus on how acting together has resulted in scaled up action and enhanced ocean-based mitigation and adaptation efforts. We will hear from representatives of several UN Ocean members on topics as diverse as science and technology, ecosystem restoration, and aquatic food production. We are also delighted to have with us several youth representatives to speak to their experiences with interagency collaboration. It is indeed essential to hear from the generation that will bear the brunt of global inaction if the global community does not start to move quicker. We must act collectively, and we must act now to tackle this crisis if we are to avert the worst. The UN system, including members of UN Ocean, are here to support global efforts, including through multidisciplinary support and capacity building. We invite all stakeholders to support and engage with us so that we can work together to do our part in this time of crisis. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentina. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Vladimir Ryabinin to introduce his opening remarks.
Honorable Chair, Mark, the podium. You know, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very unusual meeting of UN Oceans. And I could have dreamed of that meeting maybe for 7 years. You know, indeed, UN Oceans is a meeting of those organizations in the United Nations system that have ocean in their mandate. There are around Julian, 27? Around 27 organizations that have ocean in their mandate. And of course, there is a division of labor in the United Nations system. We have a representative from the World Meteorological Organization, very much involved in the ocean. We have IOC of UNESCO, the home of ocean sciences in the United Nations system. UNCTAD is going to speak after me, and they are involved in many aspects related to development, including trade through the ocean. So, you know, it's a complicated system. And the question is how they can work together. So I have to say that with time, despite some complications and issues, the division of labor is getting better and better. More and more, United Nations, UN Ocean organizations start to work as a value chain. Ocean science is very, very important, and it basically underpins so many decisions. So this is the role of IOC to support all of you in this process. And we cannot do it alone. Nobody can do it alone. And because of that, we wanted to have a mechanism that will be uniting us all. And the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development that IOC is now coordinating on behalf of the United Nations system is the way forward to basically unite us all, to make good observations, to turn them into data, to turn them into knowledge, and then achieve results in many aspects. So, you know, climate change is not only about reducing emissions. When we think about COP27, we should remember that in less than a month, or roughly in a month, we are going to have COP15 for conventional biological diversity. So the ocean is suffering from climate change, from ocean acidification, from deoxygenation, pollution, and many other things. Too long list, unfortunately. And the same is true for biodiversity. Where are the solutions? The solutions are in the climate domain, related to emissions, related to adaptation, related to mitigation, but very much also in the domain of management of the ocean. So in that sense, it is very, very important that we work together, indeed, and this is actually to my knowledge, one of the first meetings of UN Oceans in which we'll be highlighting what we do together and how. This is a very big step forward for those who are involved in UN Oceans, and I really am excited. And now please look at the screen. You see fat and gray, white hair man running IOC, and you see Mark. This is where the future is. So it's very important that young people take over, you know, and they start like you start. I'm unable to start like this. So I think, guys, we need energy. We need, I think we need your support, because we need to keep working for you, because we are living the world that belongs to you, not in the best of its shapes. And the definition of sustainable development is that you would like to live in a decent way. You would like to live the world so that other generations will also live decently. So let's try to make it all happen, and IOC will stand to support you. Many thanks, Mark, for organizing us. Good luck for the meeting. Have a good one.
Thank you so much. And before we dive into our first panel, we would like to introduce a video from Ms. Rebecca Grinspan of the UNCTAD Secretary General.
Chair, Mr. Mark Haver,
Oh,
Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear friends. I wish this meeting would have come at a better
can we
time.
please turn it up
But
and
it
start it
doesn't.
over?
The stakes for ocean climate action could not be higher. Indeed, Chair, Mr. Mark Haver, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear friends. I wish this meeting would have come at a better time, but it doesn't. The stakes for ocean climate action could not be higher in this make or break COP. The latest IPCC report warned that global warming is accelerating faster than expected, producing increasingly extreme natural disasters with devastating consequences. Extreme weather events are gateways to poverty and distress for all countries, but especially for coastal and island communities across the developing world, who are at the same time most exposed to and least able to cope with disaster. Extreme climate events have socioeconomic impacts and implications for trade and development. This is true in the short term, but especially in the long term. Coastal and island communities lack resources to deal with disasters, let alone divert the scarce resources they have for long-term sustainable development. In the light of what is at stake, synergy of effort and close interagency collaboration through the UN Oceans Mechanism on Mitigation, Adaptation, and Disaster Risk Reduction is a must. UNCTAD has been engaging actively with other agencies in advancing work to address the immense challenges ahead and stand ready to do more. UNCTAD seeks to advance work in a number of areas. For example, on adaptation, we want to promote disaster risk reduction and resilience building for seaports, where there is great need to develop early warning systems and effective risk and vulnerability assessments. And we also want to advance on the critical issue of infrastructure, finance, and investment, with estimated adaptation costs in developing countries 5 to 10 times greater than is currently available. Significant acceleration of efforts are urgently needed. As UNCTAD has recently highlighted in a policy brief, this is particularly the Small Island Developing States agenda. And on mitigation, beside the decarbonization of maritime transport, there is an urgent need to support the energy transition of the fisheries value chain. It has been estimated that fishing fleets emitted over 200 million tons of CO2 in 2016 alone, representing about 1/4 of total emissions in the shipping industry, or about 0.5% of global emissions. Advancing in this area will be very important, also for food security reasons, as fish is the lowest greenhouse gas animal protein, rich in nutrients and micronutrients such as omega-3. UNCTAD, as the UN system focal point for trade and development, welcomes and strongly supports the collaborative work of UN Oceans and all the agencies involved. In closing, let me wish you all a very productive, engaging, and above all, impactful session ahead. Thank you.
We'd like to now segue to our first panel. Our first panel will be moderated by none other than the incredible Valentina Germani. Take it away.
Thanks again, Mark. And if our panelists for panel 1 could come up and join us, please. Oh, yes.
Our first panel is going to be on delivering as one, case studies of ocean-related projects in which the delivery of results was escalated through UN interagency cooperation. With us, we have Mr. Sangmin Nam, the Director of the Environment and Development Division of UNESCAP. We have Mr. Ambrosio Yobanolo del Real, who is the Chair of the UNFCCC Technology Executive Committee. We have Ms. Natalia Alexeva of UNEP. And we have Ms. Kekasan Basu, Founder-President of the Green Hope Foundation.
Thanks again, Mark. And I'm very pleased to now open panel 1 on delivering as one, case studies of ocean-related projects in which the delivery of results was escalated through UN interagency cooperation. So hopefully we'll hear about some of the good practices in terms of interagency cooperation. You already have heard the name of our panelists, so I will now introduce them in a little bit more detail, one by one, so that they can, you know who they are more in detail, and they can then take the microphone and make their brief presentations. I'm therefore pleased to introduce you the first speaker, Mr. Sangmin Nam. Is currently the Director of ESCAP Environment and Development Division. In his capacity of Deputy Head of ESCAP's Subregional Office of Northeast Asia, he facilitated countries in the subregion to establish the Northeast Asia Marine Protected Areas Network. And you have the microphone, sir.
Thank you, Valencia. It is my great pleasure to speak on behalf of UN ESCAP and this regional experience. Our regional experience is quite unique in terms of it is not just focusing on the Asia-Pacific region. It is also connected with a global presence, especially G20 summit. And next week, on 15-16 November, so G20 summit will be held in Bali, Indonesia. So in this connection, ESCAP and IOC UNESCO jointly worked on developing ocean-based solution to climate change. But the focus was on science and research and innovation. So in this process, since also for this G20 members, which consists of 19 countries plus European Union, and all 19 countries there is no single landlocked country. So all G20 members have ocean. So in that regard, it has critical implication. Also, the significant share of G20 countries in global GHG emissions. So in that regard, the ocean and climate linkage through interagency collaboration among UN, in UN system, also in collaboration with the G20 process was quite a meaningful experience for us. So I would like to highlight just a few points on the process and also key recommendations we have presented to G20. So under presidency of Indonesia, there was a G20 Climate Sustainability Working Group was created. In this working group, so ESCAP was actively participating and leading the process in collaboration with the IOC, UNESCO. So as it is also a multilateral process, we were able to carry out survey with the participation of a member state, looking at national ocean strategies, strategies on SDG 14, and ocean-based measures to address climate action and science technology development, and then their institutional capacity, human capacity, and also budget. And then the finding from this process was one, these ocean-based solutions are really not, it's a real underutilized. Certainly the concept of ocean-based solution to climate action is relatively new. That's why still it's underutilized. In that connection, also lacking data and statistics on ocean and the ecosystem, also its implication for climate action. Also lacking scientific and technical capacities, like so the number of scientists per 1 million in each country averages about 62% per 1 million in those countries. And then the budget from national research budget for ocean is only 1.6%. So it shows the capacity for technical and science. Also, in that regard, we were really looking at how to enhance their capacity for promoting ocean-based solution to addressing climate change. And then in terms of a recommendation, as we were looking at science, research, and innovation, so certainly strengthening cooperation on science and technology, on ocean-based solution. In that regard, we were proposing the idea of a digital twin. I guess many of our scientists here are familiar with the digital twin, making digital platform space for data and modeling and simulation. And then ecosystem-based approach, especially blue carbon accounting and then storage. So whether mangrove, sea glass, and the seabed, not seabed, the sea glass and salt marshes. So for Indonesia as a presidency of G20, so they are quantifying that blue carbon capacity of Indonesia would be about 17% of global capacity. In that regard, so we also look at many of other countries have already developed plan for enhancing blue carbon in addressing climate action. And also science and policy interface for exchange and co-evolution. So this has been, at the global level, there is a ocean panel expert group, and 8 of 2019 G20 countries are also members. So such a panel dialogue platform for policymakers and scientists could be made utilized at the regional and national level. So now, so this has been presented to G20 for meeting next week. So we are really hoping that the G20 summit take this agenda forward. And Indonesia has already proposed creating G20 partnership for the ocean. And then, so we are in this process, and then also in this process, ESCAP itself had a great opportunity to accumulate its own experience, technical knowledge, and then its own networking with our key member state. So this will be another important building block for ESCAP and other UN agencies to move this agenda forward. And then, so ESCAP itself, we have been working on regional decade program on ocean, and so end of this month, 30 November, we are going to hold the fifth Asia Pacific Day of Ocean. So we are really working on especially ocean in the context of ocean account, and then ocean connectivity and ocean and climate linkage, and so on and so forth. So in that regard, this is with many global international agencies and platforms. So we look forward to having collaboration within the region and beyond the Asia Pacific. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Naim. This was an excellent initial example, I think, of regional collaboration with the involvement of UN agencies, but also in partnership with the coastal state Indonesia, as I understood. And I thought it was interesting how you also concluded saying that ESCAP also learned. So it's a capacity building that goes in all directions. So thank you very much for that excellent example. Let's now move to our second speaker, Mr. Ambrosio Yobanol del Real. He is the chair of the Technology Executive Committee of UNFCCC. I think people know it as the TEC. And he works for the Climate Change and Sustainability Agency of the Chilean Development Corporation, CORFO. Thank you very much, Mr. Del Real. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Valentina, for the invitation. The TC is very happy that we are here to explain our work and see how we can collaborate with other organizations and stakeholders. I'm in this session not only in my tech capacity, I mean in the COP, but also I'm a party delegate, and I'm the technology coordinator of the G77 plus China. I'm saying this because I will have to ask your indulgence, because after this I will have to go into the closing plenary of the SAPTA and the SBI for the end of the negotiations on this week. For those who do not know us, the TEC is the policy arm of the technology mechanism under the Convention and the Paris Agreement. And most of our work is related to providing recommendations, publications, policy brief regarding technology and the implementation of different technologies. In the context of this work, we bridge together different communities and organizations that have expertise and knowledge. And also through this work and the publications, we made available how to reach different practice communities related to a specific technology topic. And I will present very briefly one we published this year. And it was the work undertaken in collaboration with the IUCN, Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, and the Nairobi Work Program on innovative approaches for strengthening coastal and ocean adaptation. Also, I will present to you what we plan to do related to ocean in the next rolling work plan, and I'll talk a bit about our sister institutions, the Climate Technology Center and Network. That's the implementation arm of the technology mechanism under the UNFCCC. In 2021, the TEC organized a series of events as part of the Technology Days, focusing on innovative approaches to strengthening coastal and ocean adaptation. This event brought together different expertise and perspectives on how to upscale and accelerate innovative solutions to enhance ocean and coastal adaptations. The outcomes of these events and these collaborations were used to develop a joint policy brief on innovative approaches for strengthening coastal and ocean adaptation this year. As April says, the key findings of the work were the need to undertake co-production of localized adaptation solutions combining diverse knowledge and stakeholders, collaborating on cross-disciplinary research and mutual learning to develop robust evidence, data, and standards, addressing the barriers that restrict access to financing, fostering enabled policy and regulatory frameworks to support uptake and implementation of integrated adaptation solution, and building cross-sectoral partnerships which are needed for innovation and knowledge sharing. Within this publication, there are several examples. I will just name a few on innovative adaptation approaches that have been applied and scaled up across countries. One is Building with Nature initiative by the government of Netherlands, which is a nature-based solutions for water-related infrastructure and for restoration of the ecosystems. The Green-Gray Infrastructure Program of Conservation International and partners that mixes conservation and restoration of nature in Philippines, Guyana, and Indonesia. And Resilient Fishing Initiative of Peru that works to implement selective fishing techniques and improve fishing gear, reducing vulnerability and enhances the resilience of artisanal fisheries. This policy brief also identifies gaps and challenges of integrating technology and nature-based solutions that hinders the implementation of actions and suggests measures to overcome these challenges. For example, transitioning from silo approach to transdisciplinary, cross-sectoral, and partnership-driven approaches, going from restrictive regulations to supportive policy and regulatory frameworks, and ensuring adherence to environmental and social standards, from inadequate project-based funding to sustain innovative financings, and from lack of evidence decision-making to standardized targets and monitoring frameworks in order to give confidence and attractive thus better incentivizes these integrated adaptation solutions. Our sister institution, the CTCN, the Climate Technology Center and Network, has supported and is supporting currently ocean and coastal action with decision-making tools, innovative information provision, feasibility of technology options, recommendations for law, policy, and regulations, and sectoral roadmaps and strategies, and technology identification and prioritization. I'm mentioning the CTCN because the way the CTCN works with the TC is that the TC provides technical guidance for the implementation of the technical assistance responses of the CTCN on the ground. And the new program of work of the TEC and the CTCN, within the TEC program of work, we have several work streams. I will mention the most relevant for work in ocean. Within workstream 1, that's focused on national system of innovation and collaborative research, development and demonstration, and general purpose technology, we have included activities to conduct work on transformational adaptation technologies. This was an activity we include based on requests by the Green Climate Fund, and we think might be an interesting opportunity to bring up different partners that are interested in innovative adaptive solutions, but also in the financial aspect of it. And on the work stream 3, we are going to explore transformative and innovative solution with a sectoral focus, that going from agriculture, food, water, to solutions related to nature and ecosystems. And in this one, we have a specific work on innovative solutions and technological innovation for ocean-based action, including how technology can help address issues related to marine protected areas and achieve the SDG 14. For this work, we're considering collaboration with different organizations, including, of course, the CTCN, Enterprise Neurosystems, EUCN, UN Oceans, and YPO. The TEC would like to invite all interested technology and stakeholders and actors to stay connected with the TEC. The webpage of the TEC is part of the UNFCCC webpage, so you can search UNFCCC TEC. There is a section with the publications, and one of them launched this year is the one on ocean that I'll already mention. I highly recommend the part of the publication that has the specific examples, because there you're going to find the links on how to reach specific practice communities related to example I said and others. And of course, we intend to engage with various organizations to flesh out the scope of our activities in this new work plan, and look forward to receiving your inputs or insights to discuss them at the coming tech meetings in March or September 2023. The way to reach the TEC is through the Secretariat of the UNFCCC that supports the work of the TEC, and the mail is really simple. It's tec.unfccc.int. That way, if your organization is interested on the new work plan of the TEC and working with us, we can receive your inputs and organize a meeting the next week. I will be here with my co-chair, Stig Venisen from Norway, all the next week during the COP, and also the next meeting that will happen in Songdo in March. Thank you very much for the time. And now, please excuse me, I have to go back to a negotiation.
No, and we thank you, yes, first. We thank you for being with us, notwithstanding the negotiations and the fact that there is a closing plenary and all that. So we really appreciate that you came over anyway and shared this example of, I won't summarize it, you just said it. So please, please, another applause. And all the best for the negotiations.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So our next speaker is joining us by video, Miss Natalia Alexeva from UNEP. She's been the coordinator of the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration since May 2022. She has over 20 years of experience in the field of environmental protection, climate change, water management, and development. She started her career in academia and education, and then consulted and managed projects for various multi and bilateral organizations. Please, start the video.
Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to join the session. Unfortunately, I'm doing this in the virtual format in the recorded message because we have in parallel also in Sharm el-Sheikh going on the decade events, and therefore I'm filming now the video. And in terms of the messages and information I wanted to contribute to the discussion, I wanted to start that first of all, of course, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is the momentum, and basically it's a call for action for scaling up restoration efforts. And then, of course, we're saying that ecosystem restoration stands for different ways of bringing degraded and destroyed ecosystems back to health in a productive state. And it's a lot of different actions where different actors and different levels of governance are involved. And then we would like to see, of course, different stakeholders and different partners joining the forces and supporting the decade. Probably you have seen already the information that restoration and other natural solutions can deliver around 1/3 of the mitigation needed for the climate action by 2030. And this would allow to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius. So that's a lot, exactly. It's a lot of opportunities, and that's why we're speaking about this topic here at the COP27. Also, just to add that without additional restoration or carbon sinks, such as forests, peatlands, and of course mangroves, if in the kind of more blue dimension, staying below 2 degrees is no longer possible. So that's why we have to look at the nature and all kind of restoration opportunities as a kind of big complement to all other technological solutions and let's say all other type of actions. And just to add that, of course, the ecosystem restoration contributes to the achievement of all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And yes, we're also tackling the elimination of poverty and hunger, because there is no food security without healthy ecosystems. And therefore, the UN Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, it's a joint push coordinated by UNEP and FAO to prevent, halt, and reverse ecosystem degradation on every continent and in every ocean. So it overlaps in time with what scientists have predicted as last opportunity to avert climate catastrophe and mass biodiversity loss. And of course, it goes also in parallel with the UN Decade on Ocean Science. So that's a lot of opportunities to join the forces and move on. And in terms of value of the blue ecosystem, so not to overlook this, of course, you know also that the seagrass is a hidden climate champion, since it binds carbon up to 30 times faster than tropical rainforests. And it's also providing critical habitat to dugongs, seahorses, and other species. And the oceans are actually holding 16 times more carbon than the terrestrial biospheres. Again, looking at the kind of numbers and examples, mangroves can store up 4 times more carbon than a tropical rainforest. So that's just to provide a bit of more figures and the background for our synergies and joining forces. Just to come a bit with the kind of finance and the figures on the money side, we're saying that every dollar invested in restoration creates up to $30 in economic benefits. And for example, restoring coral reefs in Mesoamerica and Indonesia could deliver additional 2.6 billion in ecosystem services benefits. So that just clearly shows that we have to scale up, and of course we have to work together. And as said before, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration is running in parallel to the UN Decade of Ocean Science. And yes, this calls for synergies, and of course it calls for synergies also with other political processes, including the UNFCCC ones where we're now at COP, but also CBD processes. And we have to see, of course, all these processes a bit in a kind of future perspective. How do we build the right governance, knowledge, finance, and other enabling conditions to support the actions in the future, and how to really do it under the rapid environment change and climate change conditions, right? So we don't know, of course, what the future looks for oceans and coastal ecosystems, but how to make it the most sustainable and how to ensure that we have multiple benefits achieved at the same time. So of course we can see different elements, for example, how we predict and embed future drivers and scenarios of climate change, how we link it to policy and climate, what kind of knowledge we need to bring in the policy, ocean governments, and on the ground actions together. So all these elements are really crucial, and that's why we're looking forward to work together. And then of course to address all these different research questions, we need not just 2 decades working together, but a lot of other stakeholders and other, how to say, partners engaged into the processes. Maybe what I would like also to bring into the discussion, that earlier this year, some of you know that the countries adopted the landmark UNEA resolution on nature-based solution for sustainable development. So it provides a globally agreed definition and then formal recognition also of the key role of nature as a climate solution, and it sets valuable foundation to advance tools, scientific knowledge and learning. And of course we're working as you know, but also with other partners globally and on different levels to support countries in designing, implementing.
Is it possible to not restart, but to continue the video? I think. Okay, so that was the end of it. A little bit abrupt, but we thank Ms. Alexeva for her contribution and for telling us about the important efforts under the decade of ecosystems restorations and the collaboration not only with between UNEP and FAO under that decade, but also across 2 important UN decades, including the UN Decade on Ocean Sciences. So now we are very pleased to move to our last speaker under this first panel. Ms. Kekashian Basu is a global influencer, educator, environmentalist, champion of women and children's rights, a Forbes 30 under 30, a United Nations Human Rights Champion, and the recipient of Canada's Most Meritorious Service Medal. She's the founder and president of global social innovation enterprise Green Hope Foundation that works at the grassroots level in 26 countries, empowering over 400,000 young people and women, especially those from vulnerable communities, in the sustainable development process. And it's a great pleasure to have you with us.
This is working. Thank you, Valentina, for the introduction, and good evening, everyone. I am delighted to share this space today with all of you to discuss this very important topic. I founded Green Hope Foundation 10 years ago in 2012 when I was 12 years old. And for the past 10 years, my team and I have been working in these extremely vulnerable communities that are affected by climate change. And these are communities that are ocean-dependent communities. And particularly within them, we work with their women and girls from Suriname to Liberia to Kiribati. We're working on the ground. We witness every single day firsthand just how much climate change wrecks the ocean around them. which not only results in loss of lives and livelihoods, but also affects the women in the sense that it causes an increase in gender-based violence. It causes an increase of the burden of the care economy on top of the burden that the women already have in terms of rebuilding post-climate disaster. So in the past decade, it's become very clear to us working at this grassroots level that this is a very intersectional issue, that gender inequality, climate injustice, and climate change, and ocean degradation cannot be addressed in silos in any way. So that is why we bring these voices and actions to the highest levels of decision making to the United Nations, where we work to reiterate why it's so important that we move towards multilateralism and interagency cooperation. Given that this is a very intersectional issue, having just one agency address all of these myriad challenges will not put forward an implementable solution, because you just don't have the scope and the differing perspectives to address these very, very unique vulnerabilities that these women from these ocean-dependent communities affected by climate change face. And they face the risk then of having their issues swept under the rug, just like a lot of women's issues all around the world. And that is not what we want. One of my roles as founder president of Green Hope Foundation is as a co-lead of the UN Women Action Coalition on Feminist Action for Climate Justice. And this action coalition is the one that works most closely with all of the UN climate processes. And for those of us, organizations who work on ocean protection as well, we bring in the extra dimension for the ocean. When we have these dialogues and discussions relating to feminist climate justice and how we can move towards climate action, we bring in the voice of the ocean as well. And that is where we're actually able to see why this interagency cooperation is so important, and why it's also important to involve those who are most affected by these climate change-induced disasters. During the pandemic, when I was invited to speak at UNDESA's Building Momentum for Ocean Action webinar series, where my speech was on mangrove conservation and building resilience for these ocean-dependent communities, it was also very visible there that hearing from these different stakeholders, bringing in their different perspectives, that we needed these differing perspectives to actually have this implementable solution. So to reiterate, we as human beings do not function in silos, neither do our challenges and our solutions. So my work with and within these agencies and institutions within the United Nations, as well as on the ground, continues to vindicate my belief that interagency cooperation, not just within the United Nations, but also with other stakeholders, including civil society stakeholders who are most affected by climate change living in these ocean-dependent communities, is absolutely paramount if we are to achieve any semblance of climate, ocean, and gender justice. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Ms. Basu. Thank you for being with us today and for bringing that excellent example of a slightly different type of need to collaborate and integrate the voices of communities that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and the impacts that climate change has on the ocean, and trying to integrate those with the work of the United Nations. We really appreciate your efforts. I would like now to open the floor for questions from our audience, if there are any. If not, I have one. And just a brief one, because I know Alison is next to me, ready to start with the second panel. But we have heard from all of you these examples of positive outcome of collaboration. And I know in the second panel we will also talk about challenges, the other face of collaboration and cooperation. Can you maybe in a few words just tell us from your perspective and the perspective of your project and your experiences, what is the, let's say, one main challenge that you would like to bring to our attention? In order, yes, sorry. Mr. Nam, please.
Thank you, Valencia. I mean, despite we are really highlighting importance of a nature-based solution or ocean-based ecosystem-based approach in the context of ocean-based solution, in fact, in many countries, we are still losing coastal, ecosystem biodiversity. So while we have to restore the ecosystem on coastal line and marine, so this is a key challenge. But during last couple of years, we have seen increasing awareness of the public, especially strong movement from youth groups on the importance of, protecting marine and coastal ecosystem. And one evidence is certainly the resolution, the current process of starting new legal instrument on plastic pollution. But I hope this is one of a trigger for accelerating global, mobilizing global efforts for protecting marine ecosystem within, of course, national jurisdiction, and also beyond the national jurisdiction as well. So, but still, there are, as I highlighted, the institutional capacity and technical capacity are still limited. So that's why this kind of interagency collaboration, and as you mentioned, the interagency collaboration beyond the UN agencies, also involving those ocean, dependent communities, that would be also very important for us. Thank you.
Thank you, and Ms. Basu, please.
Sure. I would say that one of the biggest challenges I think that comes with any kind of interagency cooperation is the differing mindsets, where a lot of agencies or institutions have a set way of working, and when you're working with another institution / agency, it can be sometimes difficult to work in a certain way or even find common ground. But I would not look at it only as a challenge. I would say that is really the beauty of diversity and working together, because in that way you're really able to find the solution that is most implementable and that addresses the very, very specific challenges that need to be addressed. So while that is a challenge, I have seen and believe that it can be overcome in the future as well, and that kind of healthy conflict resolution actually does lead to better results at the ground level. So that would be my challenge, the mindset.
Thank you very much, Ms. Basu, and I think you understand the UN system well. I want to thank all of our panelists. It's been a pleasure to hear about your experiences, those who were with us and those who joined us by video. We thank them equally. And now I'm going to pass the microphone back to Mark for introducing the second panel. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. And let's give another round of applause for our first panel. Thank you all. We're now moving on to our second panel, which is on opportunities for enhanced UN interagency projects, focusing on ocean and climate action. This panel will be moderated by none other than the incomparable Ms. Alison Clausen, who is the program specialist for IOC UNESCO. She'll introduce our next speakers and moderate the session. Welcome, welcome.
Thank you. And what an introduction for a Saturday evening. I love it. You can share more of our events. All right, so if Leva and Anthony would like to join me on stage, we have probably about 25, 28 minutes for this panel. We're going to try and be a little bit interactive. We'll see how we go. I know it's been a long week for everyone, but we'll see how we go in terms of getting some discussion going. I think what we want to do in this segment of the event is really build on some of the case studies we heard. We've got some different examples to talk about, but what I'd really like to ask our speakers to do is not only talk about the challenges, which I think are really important, and I really liked those answers we just had from the first panel, but also to look at what the conditions of success are. As Vladimir said, this is one of the first events where we've actually talked about some of this interagency cooperation, so let's learn from it and see what we could be doing better in the future. So we have 4 panelists, a nice balance of 2 live and 2 remote. I hope they can hear us okay, if they can just give us a bit of a wave. Okay, we've got a thumbs up and a wave, excellent. Coming from very diverse backgrounds and experiences with diverse case studies, but all of these panelists are going to explore how interagency cooperation can really work across all the elements of the science, policy, society interface to fill critical scientific and knowledge gaps, reinforce capacity, create opportunities to share and scale up successes, and secure the needed finances and resources for climate action. So we're going to get started straight away. Hopefully we will have some time for Q&A at the end if there are any questions. So if you have anything burning, any burning questions, keep them ready for the end. But we'll get started with our first panelist, who is one of our first live panelists, who is Leva Kauguri from the FAO, who is a Natural Resources Officer from the FAO Climate and Biodiversity Office. She's an international development professional with more than 7 years' experience in environment, climate change, land use planning, and land tenure issues. And she joined FAO in 2017, has been instrumental in coordinating FAO's engagement in the UNFCCC processes across many different streams of work. And she's going to get us started talking about cooperation to build resilience of aquatic food systems in coastal areas, using examples from the Canary Current Large Marine Ecosystem and the Coastal Fisheries Initiative, work that is being carried out jointly, of course, by UNEP and FAO. And so, Leva, if I can ask you just to set the scene briefly so people who aren't familiar with this example can understand what the key elements of it are, really focusing on some of these interagency cooperation aspects, and then really move into this thinking about what are some of the challenges, but again, more importantly, the opportunities and some of the ways in which you've learned and that you think others listening and watching this side event could also learn. So the floor is yours, Leva.
Thank you so much, dear participants, the panel. It's my pleasure to be here to represent Food and Agriculture Organization. And of course, my intervention, as introduced, will focus more on food aquatic systems. And just to start my intervention, I would like to give some key facts. So aquatic food system provides a vital source of food for more than 3 billion people annually, and it's estimated that 600 million people depend on aquatic food sector for their livelihoods and daily income. And in 2020, the total export value of fisheries and aquatic products was worth of $151 billion, which is a significant amount, particularly for the developing countries. And of course, climate change is affecting aquatic food systems. There are more low oxygen zones. Ocean and freshwater systems are getting warmer, so that affects also the fisheries sector. So of course, the ones that are hit the hardest are the ones that are small and medium-scale fishermen. Small-scale and medium-scale fishermen and fish farmers facing the impacts of climate change. And therefore, FAO, whose mandate is to eradicate hunger and ensure food security for all, is also addressing the aquatic and food systems and exploring the opportunities how to make aquatic food systems more sustainable, more productive, providing livelihoods and other co-benefits that sustainable food systems can bring. And therefore, we are also working with several agencies, as you already mentioned, and some of the initiatives that we are working together with UNEP and UNDP and the World Bank is Coastal Fisheries Initiative, and this provides hands-on support to 6 countries in 3 regions. The other initiative mentioned is Canary Current Large Marine Ecosystem Initiative, and this focuses more on large-scale marine ecosystem restoration, implemented together with UNEP, and it's funded also by the Green Global Environment Facility, and supports also several countries. And another initiative that we are working together with UNEP, UNDP, the World Bank, and other partners is promoting sustainable fisheries and conservation of marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, and that is called Common Oceans Program. So one of the main challenges that we are facing when implementing these initiatives is the fact of adaptation. So it's also more focused. So what we face is that the issues are more reactive towards the impacts of climate change, and less focusing on strengthening the capacities to prevent and preparedness and strengthening the resilience. And then, of course, with the focus on the strengthening the resilience, what co-benefits that brings also to the aquatic food systems. So therefore, these initiatives that we've been working on are including also strong adaptation components. So for instance, the Coastal Fisheries Initiative provides continuous support to countries to improving fisheries management, conserving marine biodiversity, and enhancing climate resilience of coastal areas. The Canary Current Large Marine Ecosystem is also working directly and supporting countries to integrate aquatic food systems in the national adaptation plans and the national climate policies. And then Common Oceans Program is focusing on ecosystem approach to fisheries, including support to adaptation and climate change. Then I would also like to mention the World Trade Organization and our work with them, and fairly recently in June 2022, the agreement on fisheries subsidies was adopted, and that is a major global agreement that will help to repurpose the subsidies away. So this is also another collaboration and also very promising agreement that we are focusing on to kind of transform aquatic food systems as well. So with that, I would maybe stop.
Fantastic, and we can come back to that and explore some of that in more detail in the questions. But I think it was really interesting what you said about some of the challenges are to be proactive in building adaptation and resilience rather than reactive, given how quickly things are changing. And I think that also resonates with some of the comments from the first panel about the rate of loss and damage being so much faster than the rate that sometimes interagency collaboration can actually happen. So I think we're starting to see some common themes come out. So thank you for that, Leva. We'll move to our second speaker now, Ashley Bantelman, who is from the IAEA Marine Environment Laboratories. Ashley is joining us by video. She is the project officer for the IAEA Peaceful Uses Initiative project entitled the Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center, where she oversees all the activities of this initiative. And before she joined the IAEA, Ashley worked with UNIDO, so she's got a prestigious UN career, managing technical cooperation programs and projects. And she's a biologist and environmental scientist. And Ashley is going to be talking to us about the work that she is doing in the Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center, and particularly how they've been working to build global capacities in ocean acidification research through international and interagency collaboration over the last 10 years. So a long period to be able to draw some lessons. So Ashley, if you can also sort of, the same sort of process, set the scene, briefly describe what the OAICC is all about, and then really look again at some of the challenges and some of the opportunities and conditions of success that you see are essential for interagency cooperation.
Thank you, Allison. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, Good. It's a pleasure to be joining you here tonight, albeit remotely, to discuss the importance of interagency collaboration. So as Allison asked, I'll just kind of set the stage about the Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center, which from here on out, I'll probably refer to as the OAICC for brevity's sake. So just to first give you a short background on what ocean acidification is and why we should care about it. Ocean acidification is the increase in the acidities of the ocean due to absorption of carbon dioxide. This is a major problem for marine ecosystems. It's now been observed ubiquitously around the planet. And as we know, the ocean plays an important role in the health of the planet and ecosystems around the world. So this is a problem because with increasing CO2 emissions, we are slowly but continuously lowering the ocean pH and increasing the acidity. And even very, very small minor changes in the pH of the ocean can impact the health of marine ecosystems, creating harsher environments for organisms that live there. And now there's an overwhelming body of evidence that documents the negative impacts of ocean acidification on various marine ecosystems and marine species. So that's kind of the issue that the OAICC is trying to address. It is a project that, as Allison mentioned, was started 10 years ago after the UN Rio +20 conference by the IAEA, because IAEA member states were becoming increasingly aware of the issue of ocean acidification and kind of wanted to have a project to rally behind, to be able to put funding towards, to study the issue. At its very heart, in the very title, the Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center, you can see that the project has an international focus, and we try to work with other UN organizations and the international community at large to achieve our mandate, which is to communicate, promote, and facilitate activities on ocean acidification. And we divide our work into 3 areas: science, capacity building, and communication. So we have a very lengthy, detailed capacity building program that's been going on for 10 years together with other UN organizations and other international partners. We've trained more than 900 scientists now to study the impacts of ocean acidification, to understand ocean acidification, and to be able to measure it in their local communities. That was something that came up in the first panel, to really work with local communities. And as we know, a lot of these ocean issues like ocean acidification, which can, as I mentioned, can impact the entire oceanic food chain and fisheries. It's important to be working with local communities to help them learn how they will adapt. So we have a capacity building program where we train scientists in developing countries to study the impacts and to be able to measure ocean acidification as it's happening. We also, as I said, work in communication. So we try to get the word out at big events like COP or the UN Ocean Conference to make sure that ocean acidification is a topic that people are aware of. And then the science aspect. So as Allison mentioned, the project is hosted at the IAEA's Marine Environment Laboratories. So these are located in Monaco, and we have scientists in Monaco who are studying the impacts of ocean acidification on different marine species using nuclear and isotopic techniques. So I will say our successes in working with other UN agencies, as many of you know, the IOC UNESCO is the custodian for SDG 14.3, which is on ocean acidification. So we work very, very closely with IOC UNESCO. Part of our capacity building program is geared towards helping train some of the member states that we work with to be able to report towards SDG 14.3, which is very, very important. Having a full understanding of what's happening around the world regarding ocean acidification will allow us to be able to think of more creative and innovative solutions. So we work closely with IOC UNESCO, not only on the reporting for SDG 14.3, but also on our capacity building program. For example, next year, they will be hosting a big training course for West Africa that will be online on ocean acidification, and we will follow up with an in-person training, hands-on, on the ground for West Africa. So we always try to coordinate our capacity building programs regarding ocean acidification with IOC UNESCO. But I will say that there's definitely room for improvement, as always, and there are opportunities for further collaboration. One of the things that we're starting to look at now is not just, okay, let's study ocean acidification. We know it's happening. So what are some of the solutions? So this was mentioned by some of the other speakers, some of the solutions like blue carbon solutions, nature-based solutions. We have scientists in our labs in Monaco who are studying blue carbon and who have just kind of started building relationships with other UN organizations like IOC UNESCO, like UNEP, to look at those nature-based solutions like mangroves and blue carbon. And then just a final challenge that I think we face as the International Atomic Energy Agency. Very often, when people think of the IAEA, they think of the nuclear watchdog, and they see, our activities now, for example, in Ukraine, or know that we are responsible for nuclear safeguards, safety, and security, but they don't understand that we have a whole other side to our mandate to promote the peaceful uses of nuclear technology and applications. So that is something that can be a challenge, but that's why we attend events like this. We were at the UN Ocean Conference to make sure that the rest of the international community is aware that we are doing other work that is not related to nuclear safeguards and security. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Ashley. And I think that particularly that last point, a lot of us in the UN system with all our acronyms and our mandates, which are sometimes a little bit opaque, can certainly relate to as a challenge. And also that challenge of working at that global level, particularly when you have a number of agencies working together. And how do you translate that to effective local action? That seems to be another point that's coming out very across all our speakers, in fact. We will move right along, and I will do a little bit of a time check because we've only got 14 minutes left, and we have two speakers and a little bit of a close, I hope, from Mark. So I would ask our last two speakers, Anthony and Carlos, to keep it short and sweet if possible. I will also take the liberty to abbreviate a little bit your bios. Not wanting to undermine the importance of introducing you. But Dr. Anthony Rea is our next speaker. He's the Director of Infrastructure at the World Meteorological Organization. He has a PhD in satellite meteorology from the RMIT University and a Master's of Public Administration from the Australia and New Zealand School of Government. And he is also the Director of the Secretariat of the Global Climate Observing System. So Anthony is talking about the joint IOC-WMO Ocean Ops Centre, which I had the pleasure of visiting earlier this year in Brest. And the same questions to you, Anthony, if you can just briefly set the scene about what the Ocean Ops Centre is and then really focus on some of the challenges and conditions of success for interagency cooperation.
Well, thanks very much, Alison, and thanks everyone in the room for sacrificing part of your Saturday evening after a very long week at COP. I really appreciate your attention. So I will kind of maybe take a step back actually and follow in the footsteps of Mark to talk a little bit about history and just. If we think about when UN agencies were formed, a lot were formed in the 1950s and 1960s. And I mean, maybe at that time we thought that, the atmosphere and the oceans and other aspects of the Earth system, we heard about food before, that these were kind of separate and that, the atmosphere and the oceans were kind of limitless and we could dump whatever we liked into them over time. And also that that they could all be treated in isolation. And I think what we recognise is, of course, that the world doesn't work like that. It's completely interconnected. And we've also run up against limits in the Earth system, and we have anthropogenic effects that are not just noticeable, but they're damaging to the system, as Ashley mentioned in the case of ocean acidification. If we think about what we've done to the land, I mean, we've already kind of completely wrecked that. I mean, the landscapes in Europe and many parts of the developed world are completely unrecognisable compared to what they were. And I guess what we're looking at is the same thing happening in the oceans. So we now recognise the limits in the system. But not just the limits in the system, but also the interconnected nature of the land and the atmosphere and the oceans, and we can't any longer consider them in isolation. So, for example, if we think about the atmosphere and the oceans, they're linked by many processes. In particular, we've got fluxes, energy, water, and carbon, and these are fundamental to the understanding of the climate system, and we can't pretend they don't exist. They're driving, in fact, major changes of the Earth system, and we need to work together to solve these. As Ashley's mentioned, it's the increase in carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that's driving ocean acidification. We live in a data-driven world, and I'm a data guy, and WMO's a data organisation. So even now, we're using data from the atmosphere and the oceans together to drive the latest generation of coupled numerical weather prediction models. And the forecasts that you all get on your mobile phones of the weather, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, and there's a massive global infrastructure underneath that. That supports the delivery of forecasts and weather information and climate information, and it's right across the Earth and the atmosphere system. And this trend of interconnection is only going to continue as we move into more coupling, digital twins, as mentioned by Dr. Nam earlier, and so on. And this needs us to push for common standards and interoperability as a kind of a solid foundation for the future. So we know that we'll have much more coupled models. If we talk about digital twins and we talk about modelling everything in the atmosphere, we need all the different agencies who are gathering that data to work together. We have some really great examples already, and Alison mentioned the Ocean Ops office in Brest. This is a joint office between IOC and WMO, so the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission and the World Meteorological Organization working together. And this group, they manage global metadata for ocean observations, and they track data availability for a range of observation types with utility across the domains of the atmosphere, ocean, and Earth system science. We've got a couple of other really good examples as well. The Global Climate Observing System is a joint program between WMO, IOC, United Nations Environment Program, and the International Science Council, as is the Global Ocean Observing System. So we've got a strong foundation. We've had the announcement at this COP of the WMO-led or WMO-led early warning systems for all initiative. This, once again, will require many different UN agencies to work together to achieve this. So, look, I'm going to wrap it up pretty quick, but I'll say that, from my perspective, the key ingredients to success in collaboration are a shared vision and shared goals. And if you can establish those things together, I think it's a great recipe for success. Thank you.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, Anthony. I think that shared vision, shared goals, again, resonates very well with, some of the comments made during the first panel, that differing voices that have shared visions and shared goals bring richness and diversity to partnerships. So I think a very important thing to remember, and taking the time to set that shared vision and shared goals. So our last but far from least speaker for this second and last panel for this Saturday evening is Dr. Carlos Garcia Soto. Many of you know him. I'm sure he doesn't need much introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. He's the joint coordinator of the group of experts of the regular process in charge of elaborating the World Ocean Assessment. He's also president. He has a very, very long and prestigious CV, which I'm not going to go into, but I would like to mention that he is also president of EuroCEAN, which is a decade implementing partner of the Ocean Decade, in which we're very proud, and we've just had a wonderful announcement this week of a new early career ocean professional memorial lecture with EuroCEAN. So it's wonderful to see that going ahead, Carlos. So Carlos is going to talk to us about cooperation in the context of the Third World Ocean Assessment. And again, I mean, I think many people know the World Ocean Assessment, but what we don't know is the behind-the-scenes part of it, right? So if you could talk to us, set the scene briefly, and then jump into some of the challenges and the conditions of success that you think we could all learn from. The floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much, Alison. I would like to thank the moderators and the chair for the invitation to this prestigious side event, and thanking all the delegates for the attendance. So very quickly, in the sense of time, because we are running out, we have 5 minutes to close everything, 5-10 minutes. So I will summarize briefly what is the World Ocean Assessment, the regular process emphasizing climate change and the interaction with other agencies. The main objective of the regular process is the elaboration of the World Ocean Assessment, the UN World Ocean Assessment, that is aimed to provide the best available scientific information about the state of the global marine environment, including socioeconomic aspects. And this is for the benefit of to be used by policymakers, decision makers at global, regional, and national levels. This is a World Ocean Assessment that indeed includes climate change as a key horizontal aspect, and in very selected chapters. This assessment has been elaborated regularly every 5 years, and that's why this UN process is called the regular process. That is a name that not everybody likes. So we will refer to this as World Ocean Assessments that can be more easily grasped. So World Ocean Assessment 1 and World Ocean Assessment 2 were finalized and published in the years 1996 and the year 2021. And for World Ocean Assessment 3, that will be finalized in 2025, and which I have the honor to coordinate, it became very clear that interagency coordination should be one of the highest priorities, and now it's an important objective in our plan of work, at the same level as the production of the document itself. So we have carried out recently this interagency cooperation in many ways. I will summarize very briefly six of them. First, we have an intense exchange with the following agencies during the preparation of the outline of the briefs or technical abstracts of the last World Ocean Assessment. And I will mention these agencies that could be more in the future. IOC, IUCN, that is the International Union for Conservation of Nature, FAO, that is presented here in this panel, UNEP, also in this panel, IPCC, IPBES, CBD, and DESA, that is the Division for Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. We specifically ask these agencies the relevance for the organizations of the documents to be developed. We also ask how the content of these documents could be framed or could be formulated to the benefit of the policymakers that relate to their organizations. And we finally ask them the ways in which the regular process can support and interact with them. In addition to this, the agencies have been invited to participate in the regional workshops that we're having all around the world in preparation for the scope of the World Ocean Assessment 3. These agencies are now also considered contact points at the same level as the national states, and they receive and distribute all the relevant information. The agencies has also the capacity to nominate directly experts to the pool of experts of the regular process. And from this pool of experts, we will draw the writing teams and the reviewers of the assessment in the future. And we have established a particular time for the agencies to have their own review process of the final document of the World Ocean Assessment. One final way of collaborating that is not mentioned normally, but is very important, is having this type of side events like we are having now. So in addition to this one, IOC and Dualos co-organized in the last Ocean Conference in Lisbon a side event on science policy interface that is a key aspect of climate change. So these are very briefly the key elements are our initiative and how we are relating to these agencies. So I can expand more later if there is a final question or a second question. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Carlos. And I think that really highlights the need for cooperation through all steps of the process, from the scoping through the implementation. Thank you to all our speakers. Very unfortunately, I do not think we're going to have time for Q&A. I think we're probably going to get thrown out of the room before then. So I would just like to give another round of applause and thank you to our speakers on the second panel, and hand back to Mark for some closing words.
Thank you so much, and let's give another round of applause for both panels in the opening remarks. All right, now I have a question for both my panelists and for the audience. Who has gotten in the water yet at Sharm el-Sheikh or here in Egypt? Raise your hand. Oh my gosh, we are in literally the most beautiful snorkeling location I have ever been in my life. I might be a little smelly on the panel. It may be the sea breeze and my new cologne, no. But I think it's really, really important when we think about talking about interconnectivity to think about how we are embracing that interconnectivity with our environment, for us to understand if we're supposed to be leveraging these different UN systems and this collaboration, how we can learn from the ocean as UN oceans when we're talking about an ecosystem of implementation and an ecosystem of innovation. As we've heard from our speakers today, through the partnerships from the different UN agencies, there's this type of symbiosis that occurs that allows us to create these frameworks to carry out very important, although sometimes abstract actions that very much do have tangible impacts on the ground. But I think there's an element of talking about what we do that is very important. I also think that there's a very necessary facet of talking about what we can do and what we need to do that I think really needs to underpin the emphasis that we have in conversations about how we can leverage cooperation. I think it's really key for us to focus on what our least common denominators are. And I think we're able to really make that clear when we are able to connect with nature, which is why I think it's so important for us to be able to put on a little mask and snorkel and be reminded of why we do what we do. In the context of our speakers today, we've heard about the challenges that we face with differing mindsets and different perspectives that may not necessarily be the gel that we need when it comes to approaching different UN systems and processes. We think that biodiversity is so incredible, and one of the most important aspects of biodiversity is the diversity aspect of diversity. I think the only way that we can overcome these types of differing mindsets that really hinder the truly radical collaboration that we need to move beyond what we're doing now, but to get us to a system and process and the systems change that take us from a 2.4 degree future to a 1.51, the difference is a livable future for me and my generation, is to be able to embrace that type of intergenerational, that multi-stakeholder dialogue, that multilateralism that will truly allow us to understand how we can really be able to leverage the unique systems and processes that we have for the implementation of our solutions on the ground. I want to thank our incredible speakers and panelists for being able to share more about what they are doing and how they'll continue to reach these incredible communities on the ground. And once again, thank you to you all, for being here at 6:30 on a Saturday evening. And please, 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 my personal request to you, get in the water and see that ecosystem of collaboration so it can inspire us all.